It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. When a tractor stops running in the middle of a farm field, it's the manufacturer who has the necessary parts and tools to make the critical repairs.
Now, Democratic state lawmakers have introduced a right-to-repair bill that would require farm equipment manufacturers to make repair documents, parts, and tools available for farmers to fix equipment they've already purchased.
This comes as State Attorney General Josh Kaul joined a lawsuit filed by the Federal Trade Commission against the manufacturer of John Deere equipment that alleges monopoly power over the repair market.
We're checking in on the federal suit, the new bill in Wisconsin, and the broader right-to-repair movement. Starting with Democratic State Senator Sarah Kieski of Lodi, co-author of this legislation. Kieski represents a district that covers parts of several counties directly north and west of Madison. State Senator Kieski, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, lay out for us, what does your right-to-repair bill propose to do?
Well, this right to repair bill is kind of common sense, really. It says we're offering the opportunity for farmers to repair their own equipment or to have independent repair shops be able to do that. In being able to do that means having access to the tools and the supplies needed for repairs. Right now, there's a monopoly of that access with authorized dealers. And so that increases cost. This is an opportunity to say, hey, people that own their own equipment get to decide about repairing it or choosing somebody to repair it. And then the access to those tools needs to be made available at a fair price.
How has farm equipment become more complex to make these repairs and making this a more pressing issue for this legislation?
Well, as you can imagine, over time, things that we all use are more computerized.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the case with really expensive farm equipment also. So one of the things that's needed is access to the tools to be able to diagnose what's wrong. And that's where there's limitation to who is allowed to have access to that. And oftentimes it is the places where you purchase the equipment that have the access to it rather than others having the access to it to be able to determine what needs to be fixed, how it needs to be fixed. And so we're asking that that is made available to others so that we have a broader expanse of people that can do the repairs because it helps to decrease repair costs. It helps to limit equipment downtime, and it helps to open up competition for independent repair shops, which might give the opportunity to create jobs in our local economies.
But then, State Senator, on the flip side of this, farm equipment manufacturers, they want to protect their intellectual property. They want to protect their trade secrets for the advanced machinery that has taken years to come online as producing it. How do you alleviate those concerns from these companies?
Well, again, it's asking that they make things like the documentation, the data, the parts, the necessary tools available at a fair cost. But the terms also require that there's no surrendering of trade secrets, and that would harm the manufacturer's legitimate intellectual property rights. So we're not asking that that is accessible to all. We're still maintaining privacy on that piece, but access to what needs to be had so that repairs can be made.
What is the roadmap for this legislation? What kind of bipartisan support do you see it having?
Well, not sure yet. We're hopeful because we see this as something that really benefits our local farmers, right? And it benefits our local communities because it might offer an opportunity for some increased jobs. And we're all concerned about rising prices, and we know farmers are struggling with rising costs. So hopefully everybody can see the importance of passing this legislation. Right now, we just put it out, Senator Brad Pfaff and we're just looking for bipartisan support and hopeful to have it.
And really quickly here, what are the consequences if this doesn't make it through the legislature? What happens for farmers if the status quo remains?
Well, the status quo is prices are so high that it's hurting their bottom dollar, and we already know that farmers are just scraping by oftentimes. And now we hear about new tariffs coming along. They're just squeezed, right? They also have to concern themselves with the changes of our climate. And so we need to do everything we can to help our farmers make options for their better bottom line. We also know that this impacts downtime because when does equipment break down? It's usually during planting
During
season, right?
harvest, right,
Or
or
harvest,
planting.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so when that happens, and we have to have dealerships come to the place to get to the equipment, that is impacting downtime, or
Hmm.
impacting the time that can be used for farming. And so that's another piece that is going to continue to inhibit what they can do.
State Senator Kieski, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me today.
That was State Senator Sarah Kieski of Lodi to share the new right to repair legislation she's co authored. Now we turn to the broader right to repair movement and a federal suit that Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul signed on to against the manufacturer of John Deere equipment. Nathan Proctor is Senior Right to Repair Campaign Director for U.S. Public Interest Research Group. Nathan, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, how does Wisconsin's proposed legislation compare to what you see around in other states with their right to repair bills?
Yeah, it's basically similar to what is being introduced in many other states and what was passed in Colorado. I thought the sponsor did a really good job explaining exactly what the point of it is. Just John Deere and Case and the other equipment manufacturers make a full suite of materials intended to facilitate the repair of those devices and equipment, and they distribute them to the dealerships, but that's it. Nobody else can get the same level of access that the dealerships get, and that creates an uneven playing field where they're the only ones that can do certain repairs. And the bill would solve that by requiring the same materials that go to the dealer be available to third parties.
Nathan, this has been called a movement. It's been years in the making. Why haven't state governments been more receptive to passing these right to repair laws?
Well, I mean, we've passed a number of laws, 7 laws in 5 states in the last 3.5 years, um, which I certainly don't think is, uh, anything to sneeze at. I
Hmm.
would say that there's so much financial interest from the companies that make products to control the service aftermarket for those products. It's incredibly profitable. And so they're fighting us really hard. And to me, it really boils down to that the revenue associated with the repairs.
Okay, but couldn't a manufacturer step in and say, look, we're going to be open source here. We're going to be make our equipment open to repairs, get a leg up over competitors that make repairs more difficult. Why can't that happen?
I mean, in other technology markets, it's much more competitive, and that is much more the case. The problem with farm equipment is you kind of need the dealership infrastructure to support some of these things, right? I mean, I've definitely had farmers say that what equipment you should buy doesn't matter the color of the equipment. It's like whichever dealer you trust and is close to you, because you are going to need some assistance from that operation. And so to be able to replicate the thousands of locations of dealerships that the major manufacturers have is very difficult. So they have a huge kind of barrier to entry for other equipment manufacturers, and it's highly consolidated industry. There's very little choice for the kind of equipment that Deere and Case make, at that size. I mean, for the smaller tractors, it's much, if you can go to Kubota or get an alternative, it's much more competitive and easier to fix. But as soon as competition starts to disappear, that's when manufacturers get more aggressive.
All right, turning to the Federal Trade Commission and the federal lawsuit here against John Deere that Wisconsin has now signed on to, what is the FTC alleging?
Well, the FTC basically thinks that the conduct that we've been outlining is illegal under existing antitrust pro-competition laws in this country, particularly Section 2 of the Sherman Act and the FTC Act. Their basic argument is that by selling somebody something and then having this software in the device that makes it so you have to go back to the dealership for certain repairs, that's what they call a tying violation. You're not supposed to be able to tether somebody to future purchases from their based on the first sale. And they've alleged that basically this is what John Deere is doing. They're unfairly forcing farmers to go back to the dealers by basically how they programmed the equipment to operate. And that's in their view, a violation of laws that protect the consumer and are supposed to foster competition.
Could the results of this suit specific to John Deere equipment, do you see it as potentially precedent setting and force other big ag equipment makers to follow suit or risk a legal case?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this used to be the precedent, right? It's, I think, precedent revival, perhaps.
Okay.
When the Department of Justice weighed in, the Department of Justice also weighed in to support a class action lawsuit from farmers alleging essentially the same thing as the FTC has done. And when the DOJ weighed in on that case, they said, yeah, I think that the relevant precedence of this was a case against Xerox. For for capturing and trying to capture the aftermarket for large printers, both the repair and the kind of, the ink or whatever you would be putting into the product. And they view that as a violation of the law. And it's very, very similar conduct to what not only Deere does, but many other manufacturers do, especially when you talk about equipment that's very large and very expensive, where the service contracts are a huge part of the revenue. So I think this could actually, extend out beyond just other farm equipment manufacturers. I think there's a lot of other manufacturers Nathan, that have these. Yeah, sorry.
Nathan, thank you so much for this overview. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. It's wonderful to be here.
Nathan Proctor, Senior Right to Repair Campaign Director for U.S. Public Interest Research Group. Earlier, we talked with Democratic State Senator Sarah Kieski of Lodi.
Up next, a Wisconsin man died after his inhaler cost went way up, raising concerns about consumer protection and health coverage.
The consumer is twisting in the wind oftentimes, trying to figure this stuff out. You need someone that has accurate and timely information to inform the consumer so they can get the services that they need and deserve.
That's next on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Early last year, Cole Schmidtnick of Appleton arrived at a Walgreens pharmacy counter to find that his usual Advair Discus inhaler was no longer covered by his insurance.
That meant the price he would have to cover had risen by more than 700%. He was unable to afford it and left without his daily inhaler. 5 days later, he died of a fatal asthma attack.
Now his family is suing Walgreens for not offering available workarounds or alternative medications. They're also suing pharmacy benefit manager OptumRx for failing to notify him of the cost increase in advance.
What kind of protections do consumers have in Wisconsin? It's complicated. Bobby Peterson is the founder, executive director, and public interest attorney at ABC for Health Incorporated, a nonprofit public interest law firm based in Wisconsin. Bobby, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Great to be here.
Well, the Schmidtnick family suing both Walgreens and OptumRx for their alleged role in their son's death. What are the key parts of state and federal law about how OptumRx and then the Walgreens pharmacy in question should have responded to this situation where this person, all of a sudden, their medication, their key medication isn't covered, the cost multiplies exponentially?
Yeah, well, it's, you delve into the complicated area of insurance law and regulation, and most people don't even realize that there are plans that aren't regulated at all by state law. Sometimes they can be self-funded plans, like this one was, so it's regulated largely by federal law. The Supreme Court has issued rulings saying that most state laws are preempted. But there's some ambiguity in that, and there's a split in some of the districts about these pharmacy benefit managers and how they could be regulated in situations like this. It's really pretty complicated area of law. And I think one that most people don't even realize that they might have a health plan it's not really even insurance, but it's covered by federal law.
Let's pick it apart a little bit here. At a pharmacy, in this case, it happened to be Walgreens. Are there things that a pharmacist is supposed to do in this situation where a patient is going to walk because they can't afford this sudden change in their medication? What are they supposed to do in this situation?
Normally, you would expect a pharmacist to, identify whether this is a covered drug or inhaler under the formulary for that business, and if it's not covered, to make sure that alternatives are identified, that if there's a plan B or plan C that might be available, so that the individual knows what options they have. Here it's a little ambiguous as to exactly what happened. The record's a little bit unclear, but it appears that some of this information may not have been communicated directly, and that caused a devastating result.
Now, the other subject of this lawsuit, the other important part of this story is OptumRx. What is the role of these pharmacy benefits managers? What are they doing?
They could consider themselves advocates for the patients, helping to, help people get the drugs that they need at the right cost. I mean, other people think that they're working on drug rebates, that pricing is changing, they're putting drugs on their formulary that are, the most beneficial to them. So it's really an area that states have started to regulate. The FTC recently filed a suit against several pharmacy benefit managers because of the process that they use, the steps that they take in terms of changing formularies, and certain drugs aren't available. So it's an area that's under a lot of review, and I think right now a lot of scrutiny that's really merited.
You mentioned those drug rebates, and this is something that the Schmitnick family are bringing up in their lawsuit, saying, hey, these pharmacy benefit managers, in this case, they're saying OptumRx, are making decisions about what goes on that formulary, right? The drugs that they will cover, not based on medical necessity, or not only on medical necessity, but on what drug manufacturers, what the distributors are paying them in rebates, making it based on financial needs, not on health needs. Do you think there's some to that concern?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that when you look at medical necessity and what's required and what's, I mean, you run square into this issue of like, look, this person was prescribed this medication. This is what they need. They've been getting it. What notice did they have that this was discontinued or taken off the formulary? What alternatives or options were provided? If you think about it, and I thought about this just from a practical perspective, but you're at the pharmacy desk. There's 5 or 6 other people in line behind you, and it just becomes a pressure-filled situation, not only for the person seeking the medication, but the pharmacist is working through issues and trying to make sure that they're checking all their boxes. It's an area that's fraught with error, and the consequences in this case were just deadly.
In his biennial state budget address, Governor Evers announced plans aimed at lowering prescription costs for consumers. Here's a listen to what he had to say.
My Less for X RX plan will lower costs for life-saving prescription drugs and insulin. We would create a prescription drug affordability review board to crack down on prescription price gouging. We'd cap the cost of insulin copays at $35. We'd set price ceilings for prescription medication.
Now, as with anything in the governor's budget address, Bobby, there's still a Republican legislature. These things may or may not happen. But did anything stand out to you from what the governor had to say about prescription drug costs and avoiding some of these higher costs, especially for life-saving drugs?
I was interested in what the governor said about the public intervener for insurance or health plans, because in some ways that's really an important area. If people have an advocate that they can go to try and resolve some of these issues, because it gets messy and sticky right away. People don't know the rules of their health plan. They don't have it in their hands when they're going up to the pharmacy desk or they're trying to get services. You need a level of expertise. I mean, everybody has a legal right to that those documents. Oftentimes they can't get them. But if you're a high user of medical services and other medications, you need to know what exactly the details of your plan are and how to get them, and how to stand your ground when people say no.
Do we have enough consistent oversight of these decisions about prescription drug costs and how the benefits apply to them? Are there checks on this over what PBMs and others are doing?
No, I've said this for years. We do not have an adequate system of checks and balances in Wisconsin related to access to healthcare coverage, insurance, or even Medicare or Medicaid in some situations. There's just the consumer is twisting in the wind oftentimes trying to figure this stuff out. And you need someone that has accurate and timely information to inform the consumer so they can get the services that they need and deserve. I mean, I've been working on these issues for over 30 years, and it's some of the same issues. We're able to help people, but we have legal tools at our disposal. We have an understanding of the law and the rules, both federally and state and Medicaid. So we can pull, forward pretty quickly on some of these issues. But for the average person, they have no idea what steps to take.
And the reality is, for the people you work with, I imagine they're dealing with this complex bureaucracy, in effect, trying to go through formularies, whatever, while they or a loved one are sick, right? They're tackling this difficult problem at maybe one of the most difficult moments in their lives.
Sure, it's enormously stressful. Some people might be, trying to get this taken care of while they're dealing with medical debt or changing jobs, or people that are transitioning coverage from, off their parents' plan or switching from Medicaid to a marketplace plan. This stuff is really pressure packed, and people really need better tools. And we need those checks and balances that we talked about to make sure that people are getting the services at the right time when they need them.
Bobby, thanks a lot for joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Bobby Peterson is the founder, executive director, and public interest attorney at ABC for Health. That's a nonprofit public interest law firm based in Wisconsin. He gave us the rundown of a lawsuit from a Wisconsin couple suing Walgreens and OptumRx for their alleged role in their son's fatal asthma attack after he couldn't afford his inhaler. Now we turn to an expert on the financial side of healthcare for a look at what your options are when faced with high prices at the pharmacy counter. Dan Weissman is creator and host of An Arm and a Leg, a podcast about the cost of healthcare. He was formerly a staff reporter for Marketplace and WBEZ Chicago. Dan, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's put ourselves in this situation. We walk into the pharmacy expecting to pay a certain price, as Cole Schmitnick did. Find out, hey, it's no longer covered under your plan. It's gone up a lot. What do we do next?
Yeah, and as Bobby Peterson just said, this could be a difficult situation, partly because there's people in line behind you. What am I supposed to do now? So the first thing you do is take a breath. This is really important, and let's ask some questions. The first question is to ask the pharmacist, hey, is there another medicine like this that I could take, and can you give it to me? Essentially, is there an equivalent? In this case, the medicine this young man was taking, there are generic equivalents, and it sounds like, if I'm understanding right from what I'm reading, that under Wisconsin law, although as Bobby pointed out, there's ambiguities, the pharmacist could even dispense them without consulting a doctor. So in Wisconsin, that may be a really good thing to do. And the pharmacist may even offer, right? But if they don't, you can ask them hey, is there a generic of this? Is there some other version of this? And maybe they say yes. And then you've got a question, right? Everything in thinking about what your healthcare costs you is this worst possible game of choose your own adventure, because there's a million choices and everything is particular to you. But you got to ask yourself, am I confident that what's being offered to me as equivalent is going to be equivalent for me? Do I have a minute right now to step aside and say, hey, give me a minute. I'm going to look at my phone and see if the internet tells me something good. And do I trust it? Do I have access to a doctor? Can I reach my doctor in time to get my doctor's advice on this? Hey, the medicine you prescribed me is going to cost me a bunch of money. There are apparently these other options. Do you think they'll work for me? Is that worth trying? So, immediately you do have a bunch of stressful decisions to make. And of course, this kind of depends. Do you need this right now? Are you out of this medicine and do you need it every day or multiple times a day? So obviously everything depends on your situation and it's rarely what you want. Another thing is to ask the pharmacist, hey, is there a coupon for this? Can you check and see if the maker of this drug offers a coupon that would lower the price for me? They may say yes. They may say, I don't know. And again, you might want to step away and look at your phone, because if the manufacturer of this medicine does offer a coupon, and a lot of them do, but not all the time, it probably won't be that hard to find through kind of Google search. And you may also want to look at a website like GoodRx, which is a kind of guide to, like, offers kind of coupons of a kind and will tell you what a medicine will cost you at different pharmacies, because that can vary too. All right, have I exhausted you yet? You're standing at the pharmacy counter,
Right.
and I've just handed you like 5 things to do.
And I've got a couple others that I wanted to throw at you. In some cases,
Yeah.
if I can reach my prescribing doctor, there
Yep.
might be an opportunity for that doctor to say, no, they need this drug, not that drug. Is there a way to override that pharmacy benefit manager saying, no, use drug B instead of drug A, if the doctor says, no, drug A?
If you're not like standing in line at the pharmacy counter and you have some lead time, then your doctor can sometimes go through a process to get you authorized for the name brand version of a drug, if they can kind of certify to the pharmacy benefit manager that you need this version of the drug. That depends on your doctor, how willing they are to go to bat for you. It depends on the pharmacy benefit manager and what their rules are and what they require. Sometimes they require frequently. They'll say, like, put them on the generic first, and if it fails, then let us know and we'll think about it, which super stinks.
Right, and depending on what fail means for any given medication.
Yeah, and it happens. I hear about it a lot, that people's insurance changes, and they've been through this process of failure on a generic or on some alternative that's preferred by the pharmacy benefit manager. But now there's a new pharmacy benefit manager, and they're like, no, you have to go through, they call it step therapy under our plan because you haven't gone through it with us.
Now, you've been covering this for quite some time now, and you've invited your audience to share their stories. Does this happen a lot, this unexpected jump or lack of coverage in your prescription medication?
It happens all the time, right? It's happened to me. Yeah, I mean, it's frequently, right, when your insurance plan renews. For a lot of people, that's January 1st. For some people, if their employer is on a different calendar with their insurance, it's a different time. Yeah, like the plan suddenly is different, and nobody may have told you about it. It is a thing to look at when you're choosing insurance, or when you get the briefing from your employer, like, here's your insurance for next year, to really look at it. And then what you need to do is to ask to see the formulary. Bobby mentioned this. The formulary is essentially the list of all kind of medicines you might be prescribed and how much each one is likely to cost you at the pharmacy counter. So, I've done this when I did a prescription and suddenly it was $50 more. I had to go online. I had to call my insurance. I had to go through a couple of steps to kind of download this thing. And it was a PDF, maybe 100 pages or so. And then, hit Control F, searching for the medicine that I take. But that's where you'll see, like, okay, this version of my statin or my, SSRI or whatever is covered at this level, and I'll pay $5 for it. And this other version of it is covered at this other level, and I'll pay $50 for it. Here we are rewinding the clock back to months before you ended up at the pharmacy counter. This is how you would know in advance. And then you then have the lead time to go to your doctor and be like, okay, doc, what are my options? Is the generic just as good for me? Do we go through some process of appealing in advance, essentially, to get me access to the version that you and I know I need? But, like, I got to tell you, yeah, I've been reporting on this stuff now for half a dozen years, and this is not stuff I knew before I started. And it was years in before I could have told you any of this.
Now, I'm just imagining, a person on the street who doesn't have that background. Maybe they're not super computer savvy even to go and know how to search a PDF. I mean, are there, in a perfect world, what would you want to see for transparency and delivering that information and making it accessible to people in the first place?
I mean, honestly, the entire system that we have, it's kind of a non-system, right? It's just a bunch of things that we do. There's a million different players. There's all the different insurance companies. There's the kind of wheels within wheels, the middleman companies like pharmacy benefit managers. There are healthcare providers, which range from individual physician practices to mega corporations. There are government agencies that regulate things. There's just so many different players, and they're all kind of pushing and pulling against each other. And all of it creates this complexity that is very hard to untangle. The fact that we treat healthcare, as something you can do as a business, and then we try to regulate the business, it creates a situation that is unmanageable for most of us who are just trying to survive, right? Trying to get access to the medicine and treatment that we need. And it makes a ton of people a ton of money. I mean, what I'm doing the best that I can by trying to kind of break down what I'm learning, for people, so we're all informed. We publish a newsletter called First Aid Kit that attempts to kind of distill, like, here's the practical lessons. And it's a challenge. People like Bobby Peterson are doing their part by serving as both sources of information and as advocates, both advocates for people individually pursuing their rights in their individual cases and advocating for better policies on a state level. I think that the more of us get informed, the better off we'll be, and that we can learn both to help ourselves and to help each other. Right? Now that I know this stuff, I can tell you about it. Buy me a beer tomorrow, and I'm gonna take an hour and help you out with this.
Dan, we'll leave it there. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Dan Weissman is the creator and host of An Arm and Leg, a podcast about the cost of healthcare, formerly staff reporter for Marketplace and WBEZ Chicago. We talked with him about what options consumers have when faced with rising prescription costs. We also heard from Bobby Peterson from ABC for Health here in Wisconsin.
Coming up, check out a museum exhibit of native black ash basket making and meet an artist from northern Wisconsin.
In the beginning, it was about making something very useful, but after a while, it turned into other lessons that were revealing themselves, such as love and courage and patience and wisdom.
That's up next here on Wisconsin Today. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. It's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Maureen McCollum with a peek inside a historic apartment building.
Most of the folks who live on Langdon Street along Madison's Lake Mendota are short-timers, students or young professionals. But at Kennedy Manor, many residents have lived in the same apartment for decades. Jess Miller lives around the corner from Kennedy Manor, and his curiosity led him to finding out what makes residents want to stay.
When Kennedy Manor was built in 1929, it was touted as the city's first hotel apartment building. It offered housekeeping and a full-service restaurant and bar. Chelsea Bowles, who moved in 1994, remembers.
I met my husband the first year I moved to Madison, and we actually got married in the restaurant downstairs.
Over time, most of the building's luxury amenities, including the restaurant, have gone. But residents have stayed, in part because of the lower-than-average rent prices for the area. There's also the views many apartments have of the lake or the Capitol building. Many say they've stayed because Kennedy Manor has allowed them to live the lives they want to live.
And I hope to either die at work or die here, or I'm a traveler.
That's Liz Allen, who moved into her one-bedroom apartment in 1987. At that time, she says, residents fell into one of three factions.
There were the legislators who would rent just the one rooms for when they were in session. There were the old Madisonians, and the third were middle-aged eccentrics. And I was in the middle-aged eccentrics, and I'm now in the old-age eccentrics.
Today, eccentrics thrive at Kennedy Manor. They're artists and amateur historians, multi-instrumentalists and activists. Whatever their passion, they're free to pursue it.
Everything's within walking distance that I need.
Wes Freeman's studio apartment doubles as a living space in the headquarters for his film production company. He's currently working on 2 documentaries, so he spends a lot of time at the UW library.
If I really need to go someplace, I can get a neighbor from Kennedy Manor to take me, or I'd take a lift, I mean, if I find a $6 ride, I'm in.
Bowles plays the harp and hosts music sessions in her apartment.
I'm an Irish musician, so Irish music sessions where you just get together and play. And during the pandemic, they let me have people in there so we could spread out really far.
And Chris Allen, who is resident Liz Allen's first cousin once removed, is also a musician. He came to Kennedy Manor in 2008 to get a doctorate in classical guitar performance at UW-Madison.
The first night that I was here in the building, I took my guitar up to the roof. There's a rooftop terrace, and started to play and asked a couple if they mind if I play some Bach. And Chelsea said, "Oh, you must be Chris." Yeah, and so they all knew that I was coming.
Living in such close quarters for so long, people get to know each other well, and they look out for each other. Liz Allen remembers one neighbor who was in his 90s.
So I would invite him over to watch the sunset, and he loved it, and he shuffled over. We probably would see each other almost every day, and his family knew something was up, this confirmed bachelor, and he wondered if I would want to marry him. I said, well, you know, it's tempting. You're 95, you probably got some money shucked somewhere, and I just don't think it's a good idea.
Kennedy Manor might not be the idyllic living arrangement it once was, and living at the end of UW-Madison's fraternity and sorority row has its downsides, says Bowles.
I don't particularly like the really late at night stuff. Well, I would say early morning stuff, or even mid-early morning.
But she, like Chris Allen and so many of her neighbors, wouldn't trade it for anything.
No,
Awesome.
but it's I love it. Yeah,
Awesome.
It's home.
That story on Kennedy Manor was produced by Jess Miller, a Wisconsin Life production assistant. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin in partnership with Wisconsin Humanities. Additional support comes from Lowell and Mary Peterson of Appleton. Find more Wisconsin Life at wisconsinlife.org and on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Maureen McCullum.
This is Wisconsin Today.
For more than 200 years, artisans from the Ho-Chunk Nation have been weaving baskets from the bark of the black ash tree, which is native to the Great Lakes region.
An upcoming exhibit at the Payne Arts Center in Oshkosh highlights this history, featuring nearly 200 baskets from more than 40 Ho-Chunk makers. It opens on March 15th and runs through the end of June.
Tom Jones is an artist, photographer, and professor at UW-Madison. He's a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the curator of the exhibit. It's called Weaving a Legacy, Ho-Chunk Black Ash Basketry. The collection had its first showing at the Museum of Wisconsin Art in West Bend last fall. I talked to Tom during that exhibit and asked him how he got involved in Ho-Chunk basketry and curating the collection.
Yeah, so after doing the People of the Big Voice, the photographs of Charles Van Scoik, who is based in Black River Falls, had decided, I should continue my work with getting things out about the tribe. So I began collecting baskets at that time. I've photographed probably about 2,000 baskets. And in the show, we ended up having 200. Kept collecting and wanting to find more unusual baskets. And I really wanted to produce this book and show in order to help create a catalog and preserve the baskets, because there's been a sharp, decline in makers. There's probably only about 15 active makers now. And the problem is they weren't able to get the black ash. Because of the emerald ash borer, it's been getting harder and harder to find the logs or the trees. So they've been having to move further and further north.
Can you take us on a tour of this exhibit at the West Bend Museum of Wisconsin Art?
Yeah, so when you first walk in, there's about 4 baskets that are on a shelf. And a few of those were made by Helen Lone Tree. And she's one that would always kind of try to be really innovative in what she made. There's one where it's like the whole outside of it is curlicues. And I've never seen one like that before. Then as you turn, there's a wooden mallet that we borrowed from the Little Eagle Arts Foundation that's based out of Baraboo that was used for pounding the trees. It's really nice that we have that in the show. And then Throughout the room, there are showcases with old bags that were made before baskets came about. They're these like flat weavings of yarn or twill bags. So I wanted to make sure that people saw what was there and what was being made before the baskets came around. And again, those baskets started probably in about the mid 1800s. And then there are little canoes that were made for the tourists that have little handles. And so that was made out of the outer bark of the tree. So every part of the tree was used. We have 2 fishing creel baskets, and those are pretty rare. Towards the back of the show is all laundry hamper baskets. And then they have more that are out on their atrium. The Museum of Wisconsin Art did such a beautiful job of curating and hanging that show.
Now, the Museum of Wisconsin Art says this would be the first exhibit to ever focus on the Ho-Chunk ash basketry tradition. What are you hoping people, visitors, take away from it?
Oh, I just, want them to see the beauty of what these things and how they were made. And again, with doing the book, I really wanted it to be a comprehensive book for future generations of the tribe, so that if this is revived and there's hopefully the trees are being taken care of, the tribe is also gathering seeds so that if they do go away eventually in the future, if they're able to deal with the emerald ash borer, that they can start growing them. It's like there's so many people that have bought and collected these baskets throughout the years. Because, of course, in the Wisconsin Dells, the tourists would come, and that's where a lot of the economic means for the tribe is through selling baskets. And so it's like almost every family in Wisconsin has a Ho-Chunk basket. And so I believe, it's just nice to be able to come to a museum and see something that, you also may have in your own possession. But to see the beautiful artistry of what my tribe has done and the people, and also wanting to carry it on.
Tom, thanks so much for sharing this with us today.
Yes.
That was artist Tom Jones talking about the exhibit Weaving a Legacy Ho-Chunk Black Ash Basketry. I talked to a basket maker working in northern Wisconsin to learn more about how this tradition is being carried forward. April Stone is a basket maker and member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Caught up with her earlier this week. How did you get involved in this tradition of black ash basket making?
Well, I'd love to say that it had to do with a great-grandmother, but that is not the case for myself. I was married at one point, and my husband and I took classes up at the North House Folk School in Grand Marais, Minnesota, and this would have been back in 1998. He made a basket and fashioned a leather strap under the rim and also another leather strap to use as a handle, and went to work every day, and I was responsible for filling that basket and emptying that basket. And after a year of witnessing this basket get used every day, the lashing around the rim broke, and it just kind of startled me and woke me up to something. I'm not quite sure what it woke me up to, but all of a sudden I wanted him to show me how to make a basket. So in the spring of 1999, I made my first basket, and it's still with me. His basket is still with me. And for that next year, I did nothing but raise the babies and make baskets and try to learn as much as I could about this fantastic, beautiful, local material that grew all around me.
And you obviously stuck with it. What was it about making these baskets that was so compelling for you, that made you want to do it first for family and then for the world in some ways?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the draw was for me. Maybe it was because I was cutting wood splint with a scissors, which was strange. I had cut hide with scissors, and I had done beadwork, and I had made other useful items for our home. So I felt empowered through handcraft already. This just felt different for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why, but I just felt so drawn to make these baskets from this material that, is native to our area. And I thought, wow, this is just incredible. This material is so strong. It's so flexible when it's wet. You can bend it in half and it's not going to break or crack on you. And you can go out into the forest and look for a good tree and harvest a good tree. And so in the beginning, it was about making something very useful. But after a while, it turned into other lessons that were revealing themselves, such as love and courage and patience and wisdom. And then I realized that a level of healing also was taking place during the process of making the baskets.
Now, these are made from material from the ash tree. People may know about the emerald ash borer threatening the ash tree here in Wisconsin and beyond. How is this affecting the work you do?
So in the very beginning, I was angry. I thought this one material that I spend so much time working with is affected by this tiny, tiny green beetle. And I was really upset. But then I came to realize that the lesson that the borer was sending was as messenger and helper, and that it really was here to try to wake us up as humans. And so I have actually come to really respect and acknowledge and love the borer for the message that it has brought to our part of the world.
You're there making baskets and teaching other people to do it. What are your hopes for the future of this craft, this artisanship in the region?
Well, I've had a couple of really successful apprenticeships, which have been great. One was with an apprentice here at Bad River, which is my reservation in northern Wisconsin, and he brought lacrosse stick making back to our community and beyond. Another successful apprenticeship I had was with a young female from Oneida, and she was able to bring back black ash flour sifting and corn washing baskets to her community, and is being pretty successful in her location to make sure that that continues. But I always am open to sharing with people who have an interest, who are willing to do the work of harvest and log processing, because it is very labor intensive. And I just continue to do that work. And so far, as I've gone out into the forest in northern Wisconsin, I have yet to come across the emerald ash borer in any tree that I have harvested. So I find that to be pretty amazing.
We'll leave it there, April. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
April Stone is a basket maker and a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. I talked with her last fall about the art and tradition of black ash basket making. Earlier, we heard from Ho-Chunk artist, photographer, and curator Tom Jones about his new exhibit. It's called Weaving a Legacy, Ho-Chunk Black Ash Basketry. It was on display in West Bend in the fall, now opening at the Payne Art Center in Oshkosh on March 15th. You can take a virtual tour of that exhibit with a gallery of photos at WPR.org.
WPR's one-day winter member drive is tomorrow. Just one action-packed day. Your gift right now will really help ensure you and your neighbors have access to independent, high-quality content here on WPR.
That one-day drive is tomorrow, but now is a great time to give. We're looking for 600 people to get us started. If we reach that goal before tomorrow, WPR programs are going to receive an additional $10,000 from a group of generous members. I checked. We're in range. We're not there yet, so you could help put us over the top. Join in right now with your gift. You can do that online at WPR.org/donate. That's WPR.org/donate. And thank you. Earlier this week, we asked you to share a song that takes you back to another time in your life.
And Celia in Madison called up with her song. Here's part of her message.
Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. At age 5, I was obsessed with Davy Crockett, the Disney series.
Celia says the memory of the song and the show brings back her connections with her family's history across a big part of the U.S.
And we still want to hear from you. Is there a song that takes you back to another time in your life? You can tell us about it. The singing, of course, is optional. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org. Or you can call or text us at 888-642-0232.
We'll have Kate sing it for you.
I don't think so. Wisconsin Today is the work of a team of producers, hosts, and technical directors. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farad. You're listening to WPR News.